Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about My Hero Academia, episode 9 of the 5th season. Man, oh man, that was amazing. That looked so good, and I'm so happy with how they adapted that. It was a nice, full, I think it's quite literally in terms of the adaptation, in terms of the pacing, in terms of the look. I think this was pretty much like one of the best episodes for the season because it didn't get caught up in just the horrible filler tactics that previous episodes got caught up in. You know, the previous episodes do their best to try and break these fights into two episodes, but here you have just what it should have been. This was the best choice that they had for the Bakugo fight. There's just so much stuff that I enjoyed about this episode. Personally, when we're in the manga and we're talking about Bakugo, I usually call back to this fight as one of the best Bakugo moments, because this moment is all about showing how Bakugo will force a victory no matter what. It's a fight that shows this is what the actual pinnacle of someone being focused looks like. So when you see it in motion and when you see it, the anime actually did a really good job on it. It's like, wow, awesome. And to that note, you know, last week was an episode that people say is pretty. I think it was an overabundance of special effects. I mean, like, let me tone that down. It was a pretty cool episode. There were a lot of really cool shots in it. But if you remember last week, if you watched the video, my gripe was this doesn't make sense. It's what does a rainbow mean? What does it mean that Ida can go this fast? I want to see him do this all the time. In my perspective, I don't need personally special effects to give me an idea of how fast someone is. Give me good camera angles, give me like some cool choreography, and I'll be really happy. And that's what this episode brings. You know, when you look at the two episodes, it's really a battle between special effects and choreography. At the end of the day, me personally, I prefer this one because I don't care about visuals that don't make sense and don't matter in the long run. Because again, like I said last week, what do you have when you have a situation like last week where Ida is somehow able to run fast enough and there's like all kinds of explosions going around and the ice is breaking into square blocks? What does that ultimately tell you? Well, nothing really, because it's not actually what happens and it can't go anywhere. We can never reference that in the future. What you end up with last week is, again, like I said last week, something that you have to tell yourself, well, this actually isn't what happened. This actually has no merit on what Ida is actually capable of. But whereas this week, you can't have the same conversation, because what they did here, they kept all the characters' capabilities controlled, and the quality here comes in just how much continued movement there was. So really, you know, it comes down to like, what's your preferred style of seeing something unfold? Do you not care about the logistics and just want to see cool stuff happen on the screen, or do you want to see impressive things that are still held to the reality of the original story? I'm the kind of person that goes for the latter. Some people like the spectacle of it. It's different strokes for different folks. We value different things. Setsuna in particular got so many cool scenes of her just running away, or her like swirling her bits around, and it just looks so neat all around. I really do think it's a lot more impressive than last week's hyperbole, and definitely more impressionant, because again, in this case, there is not a single moment where I think, oh, this is exaggerated for visual effect. Yeah, I was just looking at it again. Yeah, I'm really happy with the choreography. The choreography was pretty good. Mind you, Bakugo does make it pretty easy, but it was such a fun episode. Such a fun episode. I'm super biased, but this is definitely more up my alley. Anyway, in terms of what the episode really focuses on, there's a few legitimate ideas. One is very obviously what the author wants you to take away, and that's that people think that Bakugo's really changed, while other people are saying like, nah, this is just an extension of Bakugo. This is just interesting in seeing how much Class 1B fixated on the idea of a certain Bakugo persona. Because like at the end of the day, I mean, like they're basing this on the idea that Bakugo can't cooperate with people, which doesn't necessarily make sense in context. Bakugo's cooperated in high-profile events before, like Sports Festival. And I mean, he had to cooperate with Izuku to get past the final exam, something that Monama himself couldn't do. So in context, this whole idea of Bakugo from Class 1B is very exaggerated. Just because, again, Bakugo has shown, at least to Class 1B, he's shown that he can cooperate when required. Now, mind you, they keep saying that he's changed too much, and it's ultimately we like even the people from Class 1A are like pointing it out, like no, this is just an extension of it. If they understood Bakugo as someone who chases victory, it would have gone differently for them. Now, the big thing here is that they've assumed that Bakugo wouldn't be helping his teammates, but you know, like that again is such a risky proposition, because when it comes to joint exercises, there's too many examples that Class 1B has been a part of Bakugo actually being able to work with people. But that kind of just goes to show how Class 1B was made stupid for this particular event. Like, again, it all focuses around how they misjudged Bakugo. And in this case, like, honestly, even if they hadn't misjudged him, Bakugo would probably still win. Just because Bakugo forces... Like, Bakugo's too competent, right? That's an undeniable fact. The man is able to pull up the rest of his team with him. The man is able to very easily somehow teleport from place to place. Like, 1 second he's in the sky, the other second he's jumping off Chihiro's back, right? The guy is able to move around the area way too quickly. He's, even with his quirk, which by complex standards isn't a complex quirk, it's simply boom boom. Even with that quirk, he's able to do so much, and, you know, like, really, he's a force of nature when it comes down to it. Now, if we're talking more about Class 1B and their misinterpretations of Class 1A, I think there's a few other spots that is worth pointing out. There is one moment when we're going into the next battle between Izuku and Monama's group. We have Monama aggrandizing himself again. And this is always interesting. Like, personally, I don't think Monama is the worst person in UA. I think Mineta is by far the worst person in the UA. And then after that, I think it's the UA faculty that are by far the worst people in UA. But Monama is just a kid, right? He's pretty immature. But he says something pretty interesting here. Because Monama wants to see... he wants to make a point about the value between hardworking students who never cause trouble and those who get undeserved attention because they're conspicuous in a bad way. And it's like, you know, Monama, at the end of the day, they got undeserved attention because they were attacked by villains. Now, that's still pretty traumatic. People could have died. You know, if people had died, this guy would not have been allowed to speak the way he had been speaking about Class 1A, because then he'd be victim blaming. He'd be blaming Class 1A for being popular, for having experienced a tragedy. But the other thing here is that at this point, Monama's group, Class 1B, was also in trouble during during the summer camp. So when you have him saying that those who get undeserved attention because they're conspicuous in a bad way, well, Class 1B technically has become conspicuous in a bad way after the summer camp. Like, they were involved in that big situation. So it's actually kind of funny. Like, when you look at his rhetoric makes more sense as an extension of Sports Festival as opposed to an extension of what happened in the summer camp. And this whole line here too, it rubs me the wrong way. Between hardworking students who never cause trouble, Class 1A doesn't go out of their way to cause trouble. Like, let's actually look at that. USJ was an attack because All Might was going to be there. That's not them causing trouble. And then furthermore, the ones who made... if we're talking about, like, listing all the sins of Class 1A, when Bakugo gets kidnapped, that wasn't a byproduct of Bakugo being a horrible person or being conspicuous. That was a byproduct of UA thinking they could chain up a child and force him to receive an award that he didn't want to receive. Like, I remember what caused that. Shigaraki was looking at Bakugo's chained up picture. If UA never chains up the child, you never have that whole kerfuffle with Bakugo. So when you're looking at Monama here, it's like, this is tired and old rhetoric. This is highly inappropriate, and this is just, like, now that I'm looking at it, it feels a lot like this is the author just getting stuck on a bit of rhetoric that hasn't aged very well. Making himself a victim and then questioning whose path is correct. It's like, this is even a matter of being correct. One group hasn't been acted upon and the other group has been acted upon horrifically. How can you even begin to say that a group who has been victimized by villains has a path. It's not whose path is correct, it's who ends up the better class. The people who are never attacked by villains? Or the people who are mostly not attacked by villains? Or the people who are attacked by villains? And like also, if you look at his dialogue, he makes the distinction between hardworking students who never cause trouble and those who get undeserved attention. He doesn't mention anything about Class 1A working hard. It should have been, and those who work hard but get undeserved attention because they're conspicuous in a bad way, right? The only difference here is the notoriety, not though the hard working thing. So the whole thing is just very manipulative, and at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense in the context of what these kids have gone through. And can you imagine being stuck on this after an arc where Izuku and a few of the other Class 1A kids were involved in a Yakuza raid that ended in them saving a little girl? Can you imagine still being stuck on this and presenting it in such a rude way after all the events that Class 1A has been through? When I think about all that Class 1A has been through, this isn't an issue of them getting undeserved attention because they're conspicuous in a bad way. And again, it throws the blame to the wrong people. The blame for whatever happened to Class 1A is squarely on All Might and UA. And when I say All Might, that's an asterisk on it, because All Might's it's not his fault. Anyway, Monama then goes into another bit of rhetoric, whereas everyone is a side character in other people's lives, but they're the protagonists of their own lives. And that's just like, that's a really clumsy way of trying to make that this is about showing the worth of Class 1B. Because at the end of the day, this is all about the attention. Monama just wants people to see that Class 1B is worthwhile as well, right? He just wants people to see that. He just wants people to take their eyes off of the people who have been victimized and look at everyone fairly. And honestly, I can understand wanting to be looked at fairly, because especially in Hero Academia is so sensational that once someone has a sensationalized persona, their path to success is incredibly easier. As we know, like the hero rankings themselves are largely a popularity contest, so things like their image does matter. But the whole rhetoric about the side character, I actually like this rhetoric. The first time I ever saw it was in Negima, like years and years ago, maybe like a decade ago, about characters being the side characters of other people's lives, but being the main character. It's a nice, pleasant idea. I really respect it. And at the end of the day, it speaks to someone showing that they are worthwhile too. Like, they might not be as bombastic as the main character of a series proper, but their lives matter as well. Now, of the two, Negima does this rhetoric way better. Honestly, when I see My Hero Academia pulling out this rhetoric about side characters and main characters, Hero Academia does not in any which way dwell on it to any significant degree, whereas for Negima, or Nejima, I think it's Negima, for Negima, there's at least one character who makes it a big deal for her personal character arc, and also applies it to other people. So this is like, for My Hero Academia, this was like a guest starring role for a rhetoric. It didn't go very far, and it pretty much stays locked to this particular arc, although I could see it coming back in the future, depending on if Monama comes back in the future. Overall, though, when you look at it, even at the end, Bakugo's group doesn't even get that much of a grading. Bakugo is pretty much perfect by Aizawa's standards. What you have to take away from here is that Bakugo lifted his group up. People underestimated Bakugo because they thought they had the wrong read on his personality, and Bakugo showed them all to be fools. Overall, I think this was a great episode. I really love it. I'm not taking any points off of it. Actually, no, the Monama stuff is pretty dumb. That actually, I think, is less about Monama and more about regurgitating an old rhetoric that didn't really work. Guys, let me know what you thought down below. I'm going to leave it there, gotta run, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.